Hi, I'm Neil Hermes and welcome to my weekly bird wrap. I've got three stories for you this week. One from the Horn of Africa concerning vultures. Another one, the Supertramp birds, the ones that can find islands and seem to move about between distant places. And the last one is a really lovely story about an osprey being saved in South Australia. Hi, I'm Neil Hermes and welcome to my weekly bird wrap. My first story today concerns vultures, and in particular two species of vultures, the Ruppel's vulture and the hooded vulture. Now, these particular vultures are found in parts of East Africa, and particularly in Somalia and the Horn of Africa. And frequently, vultures have found that feeding around human meat waste sites has been a good way to get their food, because of course, originally, vultures found all their food from just finding dead animals lying out on the plains and eating the bits and pieces of meat that were left over after the other predators had their fill. And they've adapted that behaviour and now feed around places where there are abattoirs, where meatworks occur, and they've become rather dependent on the meat in those places, the offal that's thrown out at the back of meatworks in these African communities. And in some places it's been recorded that, you know, these two species of vultures can eat 1/4 of a tonne, that's 250 kilos of offal per day at these sites around the backs of abattoirs. Now this of course has been very useful for we humans, because this offal, when it builds up, becomes undesirable for a whole range of reasons, and the vultures have been able to actually clear away a lot of this waste that we produce in many of these places. Sadly, what's been happening is the vultures have been getting rarer, and what's been happening is a lot of this offal gets accumulates, and what's been happening is feral dogs are then eating them, and feral dogs in these parts of the world have rabies. So there's connections in India in particular between large numbers of feral dogs and rabies, and potentially there's a problem in these sites in Africa. So there's this connection between vultures and removing the waste. Now, you know, there are other ways that we could remove the waste in these places, but vultures provide a very good service in places where there aren't other easy ways to handle this sort of material. So it's a story worth watching to see whether or not the vultures are declining just generally, or whether or not they aren't being able to find as much of this waste material. But sadly, of course, if dogs increase, rabies becomes a big issue in these rather poorer communities, and it becomes a real human disease issue as well, not from the offal, but from the rabies that is a consequence. So it's been good that vultures over the years have been able to provide us with this service, and hopefully we can find ways of managing vultures and this waste in a way which is best for all. My second story today concerns Supertramp birds. Now, you may not have heard of the expression Supertramp birds, but it was a name invented by an ornithological, famous ornithologist, Jared Diamond, back in I think the 60s or 70s. He did a lot of research in New Guinea, which is where I've done a lot of work as well. So I feel I'm a bit connected to Jared's work because I've worked in some of his sites. He came up with the word Supertramp birds, and these birds were the ones that, for whatever reason, seemed to be able to find isolated islands. They were very, very good colonizers. And wherever you went in the Pacific or in the Indian Oceans, these birds would turn up. And the idea was that they were just always on the move, a bit like the gypsies of the bird world. Species like the monarchs, the whistlers, species like the rails, very good colonizers, find new islands. And it was assumed, when we saw the pattern of dispersal of these birds, they often didn't go to big islands, they went to small ones, that they were constantly on the move, and they got this name Supertramp. But genetic research just done in, I think it was in Ireland, has shown that in fact the Supertramp birds have another side of their character. And once they find an island that they like, the ones that are then there become different to the other ones in the region, and they settle down, and genetically they become different. So they become, in a sense, settled birds and potentially become new species. So Supertramp birds that move about and colonize new islands, that's one idea. Another that we now know is that these birds, once they find islands, many of them change their genetic profile and become much more settled and resident in these places. And it could be the reason for example, why many rails and moorhens and things have become flightless on islands. This is what's happened in the past. Interesting new twist on the Supertramp idea. My last story today is a wonderful story about the saving of the life of an osprey. Now, ospreys are beautiful seabirds, hawks that feed in the ocean. They fly down and with their talons they grab fish from under the water. They have these massive nests along the cliff tops and isolated places along beaches. They have been very, very rare and endangered in many parts of the world, but happily they're increasing in numbers in many places. In southern Australia they are. In South Australia there's only 40 breeding pairs of the osprey. And that's a pretty small number, but they do need a large territory. So almost every one of these birds is being watched by bird watchers to make sure that they're kept safe. Sadly, a bird got caught on a TV aerial and was hanging upside down a month or two ago. If it had hung there for very long, an hour or two, it would have certainly died. And national parks people and local birders were quick in action. They were able to get up onto the aerial. They were able to remove the bird safely. The bird has now been rehabilitated and is now being re-released back into the wild. So that bird was saved, and you can see some pics of the sad state that the bird was in when it was caught on the aerial. Sadly, ospreys often get tangled like this, and sometimes they get electrocuted of its power lines. So that is a big danger for ospreys. You can see a little pic of an osprey on my website cover page. There's a picture of an eagle coming into land. That's an osprey. So check out that picture on the site. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed those stories. Check out some more information on them on the website. Have a look at my other YouTube stories. And thanks very much for checking out all my other material on the website. Cheers for now. Happy birding.